Hello, adventurers. You know we do our RPG horror stories every week here at the Round Table, but sometimes we need to get away from all that negativity. This week, it's time to get wholesome. No need to roll initiative today. Everybody take turns and play nice.
Sometimes talking with friends feels like role-playing. Sometimes it feels like combat. Join us at the Round Table and roll initiative. This is Curmudgeons and Dragons.
Hello, adventurers. I'm Jason Portizo. I am joined at the table today by Mr. Greg Genovas.
Hello.
Ms. Josie Diaz.
President accounted for.
And Mr. Jim Crocker. I'm sorry, just processing.
Yeah, there we go.
Processing just everything.
It's going to be one of those kind of days, I see.
Yeah.
All right.
No, just...
Hey, everybody.
Oh, hey. We were just talking off the recording how I'm having a bit of a rough go right now. We're not going to get into that on the show. So what do we need to bring ourselves up when we're down? It's been a while since we've done RPG wholesome stories.
That's because they don't exist.
That's because there's like 4 of them when we already read them.
There's 10 at least. It's because the internet is for complaining. That's why.
I use the
read about on the internet
to play farming simulator games.
Well, that too. But like when you're communicating with other people, mostly it's complaining.
Let's get wholesome.
Who has to go first? I don't want it to be me.
I'll go first if no one has any complaints.
I have plenty of complaints, Greg.
I mean, about this specifically.
I think by wholesome rules, rather than rolling for initiative, we should just be like holding the door for each other like a Canadian standoff.
I'm not good at that. We can go in reverse order of how wholesome we are as individuals. I think that's...
I'm not ready to go first. No, Greg volunteered, and I will allow Greg to graciously break the seal for us.
Yeah, it's wholesome of him to volunteer, and it's wholesome of you to defer.
Wholesome all around.
Thank you, good sirs and gentle lady. This comes from Redditor Noma Bianca. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. To me, the most wholesome D&D moment so far happened while playing Lost Mines of Phandelver with my best friends. My character was an Aarakocra ranger named Apra, who got separated from her original group of Aarakocras due to other circumstances that are not relevant to the story. During the adventure, we ended up owning a tavern in a small town called Van Dalen, and we had to pick a new name for it. The party's warlock suggested Opera's Nest, and everybody agreed since my Aarakocra was kind of the party's mascot at that point. I was really happy and honored to have my name on the place that soon became our headquarters. Every time we went on a quest or out of town, we made sure to bring some kind of trophy or memorabilia to decorate our tavern. We hired people to take care of it and manage things while we were gone. Eventually, our tavern was attacked, even burned to the ground. Besides the hardships, we rebuilt it and made it thrive again. At the end of the campaign, we had achieved our main goal, and we lost some friends along the way, including the previously mentioned warlock that named the tavern after Apra. The remaining members gathered in the tavern one last time. We had a moment to say goodbye to each other. It got really emotional. Our warlock had died in the final battle, and his staff now hung on one of the walls so we could always remember him. The bard was about to leave on a journey alone to figure some things out. He had a romantic relationship with the warlock, and losing the love of his life was too much for him. Our dragonborn fighter had become a lord and was about to leave to Neverwinter to take care of more important matters. The alcohol-loving barbarian took the responsibility of running the tavern. She had grown so much during the adventure, she even married an NPC, the town's smithy. Opera left to wander the world, but she would always come back to her nest. She was no longer searching for the group of Aarakocras that had abandoned her at first because she had already found her flock, and it was more like family at this point.
That's so cute.
It's so
I love
wholesome.
a found family.
Honestly, I'm going to say this, DMs, try your best to give your players a home base. It is so nice to have a place that they can reliably come back to, and it definitely helps with role play, and they can build it up however they see fit. It's a good point that is often overlooked, I feel.
I think it's a great way to have, like, for your players to come back to a home base to figure out where they're going to go instead of just having, like, a little meeting in the middle of the forest where then your DM can roll on the encounter table and then all of a sudden 6 dragons are eating them.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of encounter table do you have? 6 dragons.
Don't worry about it.
I love that. I love the idea of giving them a place to call their own, or maybe even like, separate homes and stuff like that, a tavern that they all gather in.
Totally.
I would be loath to burn something like that down. But if you're going to burn it down, you got to make sure that it's with the understanding that that's a setback and not you've destroyed this thing they love.
Right.
That they can rebuild it, they can put it back together, and like that's maybe even an opportunity. Like if you're going to use that, our tavern burn down as a way to have like the whole community pitch in and help you rebuild it, then that's a way that you can do that. But like there's too many of the posts I see on DM Academy are like, my players have figured out they really love this thing. What's the cruelest way for me to destroy it?
Yeah,
And it's like, don't do that. They've told you they're engaged and interested and love this thing.
Yeah, you don't
which means-
actually have to, as the DM, go out of your way to try to ruin the emotional stability of the players at the table.
Yeah. Hard agree on that. That's a great story. I love that when they have and the great thing about a tavern is it's not like just your house, but it's a place. I mean, as someone who used to own a game store, it's a place that a community forms around, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the 4 of you or 5 of you that are going off on adventures. People are hanging around and you're, like you say, that's where you meet the NPC that you eventually marry because the blacksmith comes by, for an ale.
You make goo
after
eyes
the long
at
day
him.
and stuff. Exactly. Yeah. There's plenty of room for that in between, dungeon delving. So
that's something that I, as a player, need to work on, is just letting things like that kind of happen. I kind of still am breaking away from like video game habits where like, the scenery happens around me and I forget to interact with it more than the story is leading me to.
Yeah, where you can safely ignore anybody that doesn't have a glowing exclamation point over their head. Yeah.
I'm going to hold the door open for whoever else wants to walk through it next.
How wholesome.
I shall walk through it next. I have a wholesome story from Twitter, actually.
A rare one indeed.
I know. So like,
I've never heard those words that close together in a sentence before.
I found it in actually a Kotaku article.
Let me tell you about this really nice tweet I read. No, you just no one ever says that.
It's so wholesome. It's so good. So the account it's from is manic_pixie. Make of that what you will. But she's a freelance comic artist from Perth who runs a D&D club. And she posts on her Twitter all of the ridiculous things that 13-year-olds say during role play and whatever. But this is a specific thread that I thought was real cute. Today at D&D Club, 3 13-year-olds defeated the monster by asking him how he was feeling and then sitting him down to a group therapy session. They were on about 3 HP each, out of spell slots and healing potions, and they beat the monster with the power of empathy. Let me set the scene here. 2 girls playing tiefling siblings, a rogue and a ranger, and a boy playing a hulking paladin in skull-themed armor. They are climbing a wizard's tower in search of their missing elven benefactor. They've had an extremely long day. I've quite literally thrown every trap in my DM playbook at them. They've dealt with magical sewage, Kenku thugs, a box of crawling claws, flying swords, ominous foreshadowing, invisible floors, and trapped tiles that spit fire or magic missiles at you. They're barely standing. At this point, I've tried dropping hints that they may want to rest up and regain some HP because the hardiest of them is on 5 HP and they're fresh out of spell slots, class abilities, and potions. I like these kids, and I don't actually want to kill their characters, which is beautiful. Love that in a DM. But they decide to press on, so I sigh, resign myself to helping tearful kids roll up new characters, and start describing the wizard's laboratory on the next floor, and the Nothik lurking inside it. The Nothik is what is that? Am I saying it right?
Is that one of those monsters with like the one big eye? Is that what I'm thinking of?
Is he Nothik, or is it like Nothic, or...
D&D Beyond does not give us a phonetic pronunciation guide.
Yeah, I forgot that... when it
one of
comes
those
to made up
critters with
things,
with
you
the
can
great
just call
big
it whatever
eye.
you want. Yeah. So eyeball guy Nothik is a particularly sinister D&D monster who possesses partial telepathy and can rot you with a gaze. As the Nothik, I taunted their characters with their past failures and their darkest secrets. I was going for creep factor, and the kids loved him. They, in character, start firing questions at the Nothik. How long has he been there? Does his mistress check on him? Does he ever go outside? Isn't he lonely? Now, this beastie is telepathic and thus can sense their sincerity, and it knocked the legs out from under him. A Nothik is created when a mage, hungry for knowledge, undergoes a horrible transformation. So I'm realizing as the kids are treating this monster like a lonely apprentice, that's precisely what he would have been. A lonely boy, apprenticed to a great wizard, and desperate to impress her, confused by her increasingly erratic behavior and distant attitude. So he plunges himself into research, trying to find the trick, the lure, the spell that will catch her attention. He grows obsessed and it consumes him. Fast forward 50 years and suddenly a couple of battered tieflings in Olympic Aasimar in armor are asking genuinely how he feels, if this has been hard for him. Then they sit him down in a circle and they share their feelings to show solidarity. It was brilliant role-play. The tiefling rogue says we've got to show vulnerability to show him it's okay. I'll go first. I'm Mocha, and all of my family except for my sister is dead. The tiefling ranger, I'm Rin, and Knowles destroyed my entire village. Yasimir Paladin, Eli Ironsides. I like pink and baking. The Nothik was impressed with Ironside's comfort with his masculinity and willingness to discard confining traditional gender roles. We're saved! They healed him with the power of therapy, something that can rot your brain with just a look at you.
Literal monsters who can look into your brain and use that power for good.
And
Yeah,
that's another nice thing about D&D too, is that, like, especially when it comes to this, it's not just a monster. Like, the monster got there somehow. He's got a backstory too, and these kids like sat down and are like, well, we want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Engage with your monsters. Ask them how they're feeling. And then once you're out of that situation, you can bill them later.
I mean, the idea that some of them are only technically monsters because people are afraid of them is that's such a Sesame Street thing. That's like Grover's whole message to humanity, right? Is that monsters are only scary because you don't understand them and are afraid of them. And if you just had a conversation with them, you would find out that they're actually lovely people.
I'm not a shithead just because I live in a garbage can.
I love Grover's monster song. Gotta say,
Is it I'm the trash
fan
man?
of his early work. I loved Wubba Wubba.
that's the song.
What is Monster Song?
If you've ever read the children's book, there's a monster at the end of this book. That is
like 1,000 times I've read that.
That is the entire point of that book. I love that book. 40 years after having ever seen a copy of it, I have basically the entire thing memorized. And
it's great.
That's that Nothik. That Nothik is the monster at the end of that book.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fantastic that the kids came into it without that preconceived notion of what it means that it's got, this alignment listed in the book and stuff like that, and just engaged with it as something, fascinating and weird and maybe dangerous. It's not like they didn't understand that it was dangerous, but they engaged with it as a new thing, that's so cool.
Dude, kids are great. Their brains work so strangely. I love to watch the thought process. Hang out with a 13-year-old and ask them a bunch of stupid questions about, like, who'd win in a fight, a shark or a bear, and see what kind of bullshit answers they come up with. Wild.
Mm-hmm. It's my favorite thing.
I got cousins around that age. I'll start doing that to them.
Bring me with you. I have many questions for them.
I would like to see, as a player or even just as a spectator and podcaster, I'd like to see somebody run a campaign where, like, they're on a quest to clear out monsters or whatever, and they're all like Sesame Street style, very just wholesome monsters who just want to teach you numbers.
One.
No, not that.
It turns out they're all Fraggles.
That's Muppet. That's Muppet Strahd. He's got to go.
They're all one big happy.
Run Strahd as the Count.
Strahd Von Count.
Okay.
I'd play the shit out of that.
We got ideas. I'm debating even releasing this episode because that's such a good idea. So I know I've been holding the door for everybody, but I think Jim is going to hold the door for me Gonna do that move where he takes the door out of my hand and says, no, I insist.
Oh, after you, sir, please.
That's
A real
True
Canadian
Canadian.
move.
Yes. All right. So I've got a story here from a thread with not a lot of upvotes or comments, which is where a lot of great stuff comes from because very, very few people have read them. The thread was posted by user DragonWolf67 on Reddit. This comment is from user Crescendo, not Crescendo, Crescendo77.
I would not have caught that.
I still didn't catch it. What? I'm sorry. Go on.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry your wholesome little face about it. Not me, but my players. I was DMing for a homebrew campaign about a vampire invasion. One player, a drunken master monk, had a drinking contest with a Goliath and got so drunk, we joked that his bloodstream was now just pure moonshine. It became an actuality when a vampire tried to bite the monk, when the player asked for a con save against it, and the vampire straight up died via alcohol poisoning. So what do these guys do? Leave the dungeon, go to a tavern, and get shit-faced together so vampires can't bite them. We took a 15-minute break, and the monk decides to have a few rounds so he can roleplay to his heart's content. Everyone else agreed to join in, and they got shit-faced IRL. They go back into the dungeon and somehow found a way to the boss and killed him. After the fight, they kept on throwing compliments at each other and how it was a good idea to get shit-faced to fight vampires. How the healing spells were super good timing. Everyone was just admiring everyone else's characters. Before this whole fiasco, I asked if I could record the second half of the session in case anyone forgot what happened because of them being, well, shit-faced. They agree, and I send the video on our group chat the next day. Somebody said that was pretty funny, and they decided to make it a tradition when they enter a dungeon to get shit-faced in-game and IRL. Me, being the only semi-sober person, hearing everyone just drunkenly complimenting everything that happens warmed my heart.
That's really cute.
That is
So this
really
ties
cute.
in a bit to our DM Academy thing from last month of, do you drink at the table? Getting too drunk is usually kind of a problem unless you're all like the I love you so much types of drunks. Then it
Mhm.
gets wholesome pretty quick.
I mean, if you want to get drunk with the right kind of people while you play D&D, then do it. If you're gonna show up and be like, Jason,
Yes, Josie.
I love you and your beautiful bushy beard. And I like the way that your glasses make your eyes sparkle like that.
They make them work
Like,
too.
that's
Thank you.
fun. If you throw up on the table and try to punch the DM, like maybe
Don't do
maybe
that.
not.
Right. There is no one in the world more wholesome than a group of drunk girls.
Especially if they're in the bathroom.
Yes. From so I'm told.
Can confirm. I'll do the confirming for this. Don't worry, boys.
Thank you, Josie. This got weird. No, I've had drunk girls, a whole group of them now. There I am, like trying to work, and all they want to do is tell me how much they like my beard for like a while, like a long time, like to the point where it's just like, okay, this is cute. Then they like stop being cute, and then start being cute again because they wouldn't stop,
You just got to get the right balance.
or just keep going until the bell curve fixes itself.
That is, that's
exactly,
getting the right balance. It's like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
the repetition in humor thing.
Sometimes balance is about just waiting out the weird parts.
Yeah. You repeat it 3 times, it's funny. You repeat it 10 times, it's annoying. You repeat it 30 times, it's funny again.
Yep.
That's
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep. Jim, how you looking?
Oh, good. I'm ready to go.
Yeah,
Jim,
wasn't a lot to discuss on that
you're
one. So
always good looking. Don't
I'm-
even trip. Don't even worry about it.
I am ready to go. I appreciate that. Thank you, Josie.
thank you, drunk Josie.
I've got
Anytime.
some seltzer here for you.
We left some Tylenol and a glass of water next to your bedstand.
You guys are just so
have some-
great.
Have a grilled cheese.
I tucked you
Have
in. and
grilled
didn't-
cheese. Josie.
Ooh, that sounds good.
So I actually am going to kind of segue from Josie's story because my story is also about how cool kids can be when you're playing with them and how even if you've been playing D&D for 35 years, you can learn from them if you're open to that and to pay attention. So this is from when I was running games in my game store. We did Wednesday night D&D. Those were 2-hour D&D sessions. And we had 5 or 6 tables that we ran at all times. And because I was the owner, I just sort of ended up with the table that had mostly the younger players, which might sound like it might be the start of a horror story, but these kids were all great. And basically, like, it wasn't like they got stuck with me. Like, they wanted to play with me because it was cool that they got to play with the owner, right? And their parents.
That's
and,
still
like,
cool.
I went
Mhm.
out of my way to introduce myself to the parents. I ended up with most of those younger kids, including 1 or 2 kids that, were a little bit on the spectrum and stuff like that. And these kids were great. a little overenthusiastic sometimes and a little distractible, but they bought into the game 100% in the way that a lot of the older players didn't necessarily. Sometimes you kind of have to, coax them to do that. And they came up with these ideas that were great in a way that kids who don't have a lot of preconceived ideas and notions can do, just like Josie was talking about. So this is from what I used to do when I built campaigns. Was I would get them around the table and we would just kind of homebrew something, sort of mash it together based on their backgrounds. I would maybe give them a line or two about, we're all on an island, come up with people that are from islands. We're all in a big city, come up with people that are city, and then kind of build the campaign based on their background. So one of them had the, typical kind of edgy ranger, my village was killed and I was the only survivor.
Oh my God, the Sasuke
right?
Uchiha story.
Yeah. So I pressed him to make sure that he had some connections in his new home. I was like, okay, cool. Everyone in your village got killed, but somebody taught you how to be a ranger. You hang out somewhere now. Tell us who those people are and stuff like this. And the other thing that I wanted to make sure I did was relatively early in the game, we had an adventure that returned to his abandoned village. So we kind of got to go through the ruins of that and stuff like that. And so that he could tell us about the place. And so kind of as we were going through, I directed all those questions at him. I had a rough idea of like where it was on the map and stuff like this. But when we got there, I was like, tell us about the house that, you grew up in until, while you were a very young child. Tell us about where the temple was and stuff like this. And we ended up coming up with one of the things that I just sort of tossed in there based on something he said was a winery that they kind of made wine there, because this was I think like a wood elf village or something like this. So I gave them as part of their, and there was like a big ogre there that was like guarding it or something. And so they defeated the creature that was there. And I gave them a bottle of the finest vintage of wine that had somehow survived this cataclysm that was like, they were all smashed, but amongst all the broken glass, they found one really fine bottle of wine that was like this is worth 100 gold pieces if you bring it back to the camp kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it was meant to be like a treasure, like a piece of jewelry or something like that. And that was what I had in mind when I gave it to them. And I didn't think anything else of it. But so rather than go back home right away, they decided to follow clues from the village to the humanoid army that had presumably destroyed the village that was camped out in the mountains just over the border to the Orcish nation. So this was very much a thing where like there were countries with boundaries and, kind of like an early Europe kind of a thing that we had set up there. So while they're there kind of sneaking around, they encounter this Orcish patrol and trail them to see what's going on, where they're going. And they, talking amongst themselves, come up with this plan to use the wine to try and like get them drunk or something like this and everything. And I initially said no, because like that was meant to be treasure. And I didn't want my game to get silly, right? With like, oh, we're going to get the orcs drunk kind of thing like that. And they proposed a couple, and like I said no initially, and they tried a couple of other different ways to do it, and I said no to each of those. And then one of the players said, wow, you really don't want us to use that bottle of wine, do you? And I said to myself, holy shit, I don't. I really don't. And why is that? And I didn't have a good answer. So I said to this kid, like this 12-year-old kid that said that to me, you know what? You are absolutely right. And you tell me your plan and we'll do it. So they took one of their packs and left it half open on the side of the trail by the patrol route for the guards, as if someone had dropped it running away, like someone heard them coming and like threw it off in a hurry and ran with kind of just like the end of the bottle sticking out of the pack. And the orcs found it, kind of looked around, poked the bushes with their spears and stuff like this, and figured, okay, well, somebody dropped this. We're just going to take it back to our campfire. Went back to their camp, and they all sat around laughing, enjoying it, passing it around. And it's not like they were, I didn't have them get like, crazy shit-faced drunk or anything like that. But, the PCs then ambushed them while they were just kind of enjoying themselves, sort of kind of held them all at spear point and sword point and just kind of said, okay, jig is up. You guys can surrender or we're going to run you through. And so we just had the orcs surrender because in this game, one of the ground rules we had, especially when playing with the kids, was like, okay, if you win the fight, you never have to worry that something's going to come back and take you down, right? Like if you manage to find a way to get the drop on somebody and you say, okay, you're our prisoners now, I'm not going to, as the DM, like take that victory away from them. So they knew that if they tied these guys up, they'd stay tied up and they wouldn't have to go and, they wouldn't have to run everybody through just to keep them from doing that, to keep them from coming back after them. But they weren't jerks about it. They were totally cool. Like, they were thrilled that their plan worked. They were fine with losing the gold from the wine because it led to important intel. The orcs told them, well, the army's over there, but if you don't want them to see you coming up on you, you should climb that hill there and look at them from up above. So they got this information that I honestly actually didn't really have a way to convey to them until they came up with this plan and sort of realized after the fact that that's what happened. And they handed me this great scene to tie something from the village to their efforts to find out what happened in the village. So like this thing that I just intended as treasure, they turned into a plot hook in a way that like just I would never have come up with on my own. And it was great. And and playing with kids is, as long as they understand that when they win, and you're not going to have stuff come back and bite them like these kids did, it was fantastic. And like that has always stuck with me as one of the most memorable moments I had in running those games at the store, which were, full of a lot of fun. But that in particular was like, holy shit, 12-year-old kids taught me how to be a better DM at my table in my store.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, kids are good at like non-linear thinking because they haven't been taught to only think in the straight line that us have been doing it for years.
Kids don't give a shit about physics. It doesn't have to be real for a kid to believe in it. And that can make, like, honestly, some of the most interesting stories. Like, I worked at Barnes & Noble for several years, and a lot of the people that worked there were more interested in reading, like, young adult fiction than it was, geared towards adults, because adult fiction is kind of monotonous and boring, and stuff that's directed towards younger audiences plays a lot more with realism, I feel like. And D&D is really also geared towards children.
It definitely can be. Anything where you're going to imaginative, fantastic elements like this, you can absolutely get geared towards kids.
And it's interesting because there are times when the DM wanting to make sure that the campaign sticks to the premise of the campaign is actually important. And it's okay to say no if somebody comes up with something that's like wildly off base. But like I had in my head kind of like I had spun out this narrative of how it was gonna go before they actually did it and told me what they were actually gonna do. Mm-hmm. And so when they kind of pushed me on that, which is, I think, not something that any of the adults in the store would have done. If I'd said, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. Any of the like adults that I regularly played with would have said, well, okay, that's the DM saying no, so we'll try a different way.
An adult will take a hint.
Well, and the kid like wasn't a jerk about it. He was, like I said, he just said, well, you really don't want us to do that, do you? And like I couldn't come up with a reason other than I hadn't really trusted them to play the way that they had been playing all along, which was my bad.
Yeah. Everyone's got a plan until 12-year-olds get involved.
Very true. As a former
12-year-old
and childcare worker.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, that was all that owning that store was all of the vicarious parenting that I needed. So
yeah,
so I got that out of my system running D&D for those kids.
Guys, you feel wholesome?
Much more than when we started, for sure.
You feel warm and fuzzy?
I'm feeling a warm spot.
Nice. You should clean that, Josie.
No.
No.
It's in her heart.
Yes.
Stop it.
Gross. Guys, thanks for joining me today. I always like doing these episodes. These always make me feel good. And like I said, I wasn't feeling great when going into this. I feel okay now.
It's lovely. Yeah, and I hope those kids are still playing D&D.
I hope so
I
too.
don't know. I haven't heard from him in a few years. They're probably all in college now. So
I don't like to think about the passing of time.
No, God.
If we could not talk
either.
about that.
I saw my cousins before. I'm like, it feels like last year they were like 9 and just, just yelling at each other all day. Now they're like seniors in high school.
I think my little baby cousin
run some D&D for him,
is
dude.
now in college, which is nauseating.
One might be down for it. The other 2 definitely not, but one might be into it if I approach her the right way.
Yeah, there's one of my cousins we've been trying to get to a convention together, but the last 2 years have not been cooperative in that regard. So we're gonna make it eventually.
She's receptive to it. I'll report back.
Excellent.
That's going to do it for today. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next Wholesome Stories, but we've got horror stories coming out this Friday, of course, and every Friday. So check those out. We're always looking for horror stories. We do those all the time. But if you have a wholesome story or a horror story, go ahead and go to curmudgeonsanddragons.com/contact. That'll bring you to the email form, or you can email us directly at curmudgeonsanddragonspod@gmail.com. They both go to the same place, so whichever's easier for you to remember. But send us your story, and if it's
I would appreciate some wholesome stories because they are a real
Wholesome
bitch and a
stories would be
half to
great.
find.
They're harder to Google. I can get a horror story in 2 seconds.
I can throw a dart out my window and hit a horror story.
You can throw a dart out your window and create a horror story.
Fun
Greg,
fact.
no,
Throwing a
we're not
dart
bringing it
is
up.
how Josie created her own horror story.
Save that for one of these Fridays, Greg.
I am the
All right.
consequences of
I
my
would
own
be
actions.
totally fine if you did nothing but Josie horror stories, Greg. But
I'll have to talk with Luke about his campaign. Because,
maybe we'll do an episode of just Josie horror stories.
Oh my God, please. I would actually love that because I love being known as a menace to society.
Maybe next time Jim or Josie can't make it to a session, you and I will just do an episode about that.
sounds good.
All right. Check out curmudgeonsanddragons.com. Everything you need to know is on there. We will see y'all next time. Greg, Josie, Jim, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for listening to Curmudgeons and Dragons. Please share this with your favorite adventurers. Leave a review on Apple and follow us on social media. All links can be found at curmudgeonsanddragons.com. Practice safe adventuring, my friends.
This has been a JTP Audio podcast. Thanks for listening.